Hello, everyone. I am Vanessa Evers, the public historian at LGBTQ-RAN, and we're excited to celebrate the 20th anniversary of LGBTQ-RAN and acknowledging 20 years of queering our roots, the theme for our month-long celebration. Thank you for those who are able to attend our launch party on October 3rd. And for those of you who are new to LGBTQ-RAN, we are a digital enterprise, meaning we are not a physical repository that stores papers. We advise and support others in their efforts to preserve their records. We collect and provide historical information on our website about LGBTQ+ persons and groups from a wide array of religious expressions around the world. And we encourage research and scholarship in LGBTQ+ religious history. Today is the second of 5 intergenerational conversations with some of the pioneers who challenge religious organizations to accept the LGBTQ people. The remaining sessions will take place over the next 3 Wednesdays, 1 p.m. Central Time. Before I introduce the elder conversation participants, Jonathon Thunderword and Robyn Henderson Espinoza, Justin Sabia Tenise, an LGBTQ-RAN board member, will say a few words about our financial campaign.
I'm Justin Sabia Tanis from the LGBTQ-RAN Board of Directors. Thanks again for joining us for this great conversation as part of LGBTQ-RAN's Queering Our Roots campaign. We remember the past in order to guide us into the future. And as we celebrate all that LGBTQ-RAN has accomplished over these 20 years, we also want to empower the continuation of this historic work into the future. So we decided to place a challenge before all of us. For our 20th anniversary, we want to raise $20,000 to help plant the seeds for the next 20 years. And we're actually well on our way towards that goal. So we are inviting you to join the other sponsors and donors to keep us moving towards that goal. If you type in giveq.org on your phone or on the computer, or scan this handy link right here, in a couple of minutes, you can direct your gift towards the Queering Our Roots campaign. And of course, your gift is tax deductible. Thanks to the generosity of an anonymous donor, all gifts up to our $20,000 goal will be matched. So your gift will be doubled if you give today. Furthermore, if you're making a gift to LGBTQ-RAN for the very first time, thanks to another donor, your gift will be matched again. So your first time gift will be tripled. $25 becomes $75, $100 becomes $300. LGBTQ-RAN accomplishes so much on a very small budget. We're driven by the mantra that history is told from the perspective of those who preserve their records. LGBTQ-RAN is committed to ensuring our legacy will be passed on to future generations. Will you help make that happen by giving a gift to Queering Our Roots today? Remember, the link where you can give is giveq.org. And we thank you for your generous support today and in the past and the future. Thank you so much for being here.
Today, we have the pleasure of honoring Jonathon Thunderword, who is a theologian, a scholar, and a free thinker. He is an omni-faith, multi-spiritual practitioner and an Igbo Hebrew practitioner. Jonathon is an ordained minister, founder of Finding Another Right Road Authentically and Holistically, FARA, and founder of By the Way Ministry in Virginia. He is a certified alcohol and substance abuse counselor. He's a chair for the Golden Flames with BTAC, Black Trans Advocacy Coalition. He is also affiliated with National Alliance on Mental Illness, NAMI, Faith Network, Trans Faith, Trans Saints, TFAM, the Fellowship of Affirming Ministries, Pacific School of Religion alumnus, Laharis Judea Hebrew alumni, Black Trans Advocacy International, and Brothers Rising in Oakland, California. Jonathon has spent his adult career trying to relieve suffering, working with persons living with the homeless population, people with addictive behavior, sex abuse, spiritual religious abuse, and those that are marginalized. He is an environmentalist and an animal activist. He is the author of From Christendom to Freedom Journey, Making with a Black Transgender Elder, which was published last year in 2020. In conversation with Jonathon Thunderword will be Dr. Robyn Henderson Espinoza, who has been described in a myriad of ways: a scholar activist, scholar leader, thought leader, teacher, public theologian, ethicist, poet of moral reason, and word artist. Among these ways of describing Dr. Robyn, they are also a visionary thinker who has spent 2 decades working in the borderlands of church, academy, and movement, seeking to not only disrupt but dismantle supremacy, culture, and help steward the logic of liberation as trans, queer, Latinx. They inflesh a deep hope of collaborating in these borderland spaces where their work seeks to contribute to the ongoing work of collective liberation. Dr. Robyn is the founder of the Activist Theology Project, a Nashville-based collaborative project that seeks to work with the dominant culture and produces curriculum at the intersection of scholarship and activism. Dr. Robyn was named one of 10 faith leaders to watch by the Center of American Progress in 2018. Dr. Robyn has been featured in fashion magazines and appeared on many different podcasts. As a scholar activist, Dr. Robyn is committed to translating theory to action so that our work in the borderlands reflect the deep spiritual work of transforming self to transforming the world. As the founder of the Activist Theology Project, Dr. Robyn is committed to the work of social healing through public theology initiatives and writes and creates both academic and other valuable resources, including digital resources. Dr. Robyn is a non-binary, trans, queer, Latinx, and an adult on the autism spectrum who calls Nashville, Tennessee home. They are the author of Activist Theology 2019, published by Fortress Press, and the forthcoming book, Body Becoming, A Path to Our Liberation, to be published by Broadleaf Press in 2022. I am excited about this intergenerational conversation between Jonathon and Robyn and invite you all to join me in watching the pre-recorded conversation that took place this past week due to health concerns. At the conclusion of the conversation, Jonathon and Robyn will be available for a live Q&A session. Thank you so much.
Well, hi, Jonathon. How are you?
I'm fine. And how are you today?
Well, it's a great Sunday. I'm happy to be alive and I'm happy to be here with you. I got a chance to read your bio, and there was one word that kept emerging for me as I read your bio, and I want to say it out loud, and I'd love to see if we could maybe have a conversation about that. The word that kept coming up for me was radical courage. That your story is one of radical courage, that you went to the underside of history, you went to the margins of the margins, and I'm wondering if that does that word or that phrase resonate with you, and if so, what do you make of it?
Well, that's interesting because I never really thought of it as radical courage. I always thought of it as bravery, going out separate from the rest of the tribe, going out on a mission that you really know that the great possibility that no one will ever even know you're out there.
Right.
And that takes a sort of bravery.
Yeah.
To go out, at least for me, to go out from amongst my peers, other ministers, pastors, educators, and do something totally different. And to basically be separated and to go to a group of people and a call to people who don't even recognize you're there to help them.
Yeah.
For years and years, that's why I was so shocked about this. I have done so much work and no one ever knew I was there. I was like this little thing in the dark that goes around and the tooth fairy. You never see the tooth fairy, but you get there and you have a tooth. Right. And so it's a myth. In fact, I was given a t-shirt once said, grandfather, the myth, the man, the legend, a myth. It's like I never really existed, but the work I did worked for me. The old gospel song, may the work I do speak for me. has always been my motto. And not only that, for me in this bravery, many things that I have said and done over the years, I never asked credit for them. In fact, I'm not a credit asking person. And I'm a person who likes to come up with great ideas and let somebody else carry them out.
Yeah.
I said, look, this is a great idea. If you do this and this and this, and then they do it. And they never say, you know who gave me that idea? So that's been my life story. You know, I said, oh, well, they actually did something about what I said a while back. And so that's brave to be out there alone and not having a lot of support. Even the ministry that I do today, Farah, finding another right road authentically and holistically, is not something that I can even market. I can't say this is my program. And I live in a society where if you don't have a target audience, if you don't have a target speech, if you don't have the right promotion, if you don't have all this, then you're just spinning your wheels in the dust.
Right.
And, you know, so I never had that and never wanted that. My first motto was always one person at a time. One person at a time. When I wrote my book, say, who is your target audience? One person. If one person buys the book, reads it, and their life is changed in any way for the good, I'm through. I did what I came to do. So that makes it a different type of outreach. Yeah. Because I'm only trying to reach one. I'm not trying to have a YouTube following of 500 followers or whatever, you know. I'm not going for all that. I get excited about one. Yeah. You know, the book I wrote, it's just been kind of on its own. It's been a mouth-to-mouth book, you know. Somebody read it and they tell somebody about it. But what I found that makes me very happy is that someone will read the book and then they'll tell somebody else about the book. And that person's life is changed and they'll tell that person who gave them the book, wow, I came out after I read that book, you know? So I feel that what I do does matter. Yeah. And that's all that matters with life, is that it matters to that one person. Right. And I don't think we're all sent to save the masses, but that one person, because in an old proverb, one person can save the world. So all I do is take care of that one and let them do the rest.
That's amazing. You know, I've read your story. We've had a previous conversation and I continue to be inspired by you and by your work and by this call on your life. When I read your story, the other word that emerged for me was compassion. And you know, the root of compassion is suffering with, and it seems like your entire ministry has been a model for us, those who are on the outside watching, to learn how to suffer with what's happening. First with the AIDS crisis, with trans people, etc. Does that word resonate with you? Compassion? Is that? Do you feel like maybe that's a spiritual gift of yours?
Yes, if anything, I would say it is my number one spiritual gift. Without compassion, nothing else could stand for me. Yeah, you got to have compassion in that, to go out and feel, and not only feel, but become a part of. You know, it's not enough just to go out and give a person a sandwich. Right. But to be able to go with people when there is no sandwich. Right. And to sit there in their hunger and say, I don't have a sandwich, but I can sit with you and we'll wait together for this sandwich.
Yeah.
And that takes a certain amount of compassion, that you actually feel the pain and the anguish of the other person, to the extent that you are just driven to do something about it. It's like to see a knife driven through someone else's arm is the same as to see a knife driven through my arm. It's that close connection that when you hurt, I hurt. And because I'm hurting, I want you to stop hurting.
Right.
So really it's a way of taking care of myself as I take care of you.
Yeah.
And that's what compassion is all about. And when I was studying Buddhism and Jainism, the theme is always compassion, and compassion for all, not just for other human beings, but for every living being on the planet. And I feel in developing that compassion, it allowed me to feel compassion for all living beings. I can cry over a tree being mistreated as well as I can cry over a child being mistreated. And to me, that is the whole realm of compassion, to be able to identify myself as it. As Mother Teresa used to say, when I see the children and the people of India, I see my Christ. So when I see others hurting, and especially when others are hurting that those who say they've been called to ignore, that really gets my feathers wound up, because you are called to this, which is one of my beefs today with Christians and Christianity, that divide, you know, of this is what we think it is and this is what you. I can say I'm a Christian and be a member of the Ku Klux Klan.
Right.
You know, and I can say I'm a Christian and march with Martin Luther King.
Right.
There's something uneven about how we interpret scripture. And that's why I'm grateful for people like you, who you have your doctrine and you're working on it from both angles. You know, the both and the is and the is coming together as one, taking everyday life and everyday pain and then putting it in an academic place. That's why I'm so thrilled to be with you, because you're doing something that was way beyond my imagination. But now you come along and you say, I see pain, I see, but I got to reach people on their level where they are. And I hate to say it, but it's so true. Sometimes without something behind your name, it seems like the more alphabets you have, the bigger your soup is, you'll listen to. Because you could be a brilliant person if you don't have certain credentials. Right. They're not going to listen to you. If you haven't had a certain amount of literature published, they won't listen to you. Where on my hand, no, until his last book, no books written, no papers, no degrees, no nothing. I was more interested in getting the work done. I, at my age, didn't have time to work on a thesis for 2 years. I mean, people were dying. So it was a different time. You know, I mean, they were dropping like flies. Excuse me while I go and get my Ph.D. and I'll be back with you. Would not work for me. But now this new generation is saying, I got time to do both and work it so I can work on both sides of the board. Like you have this passport that lets you in and out of each city.
You were talking about having these, you know, credentials and letters behind your name. You know, my family migrated from Oaxaca, Mexico, up north and settled along the border of Texas and Mexico, and then migrated northward. And I'm the first person to have gone to high school and graduated high school and gone on to college and even think about going on to graduate school. And so I'm like a little fish in tumultuous water with a whole bunch of sharks. Well, I don't know, I don't know what it means to go to graduate school or earn a doctorate, you know, but I do find that having credentials allows me at tables and into rooms that other people don't have access to. So I I do think, unfortunately, it creates conditions for access, which is something I want to ask about, because your entire life, from the story that we exchanged in our first conversation to reading your bio, has been about access, has been about you fighting for access. And you didn't just care about yourself, but you cared about the underside, and and making sure that the underside had access. What compelled you to be that kind of person, that kind of activist, that kind of minister?
Well, I don't know whether we mentioned it earlier, but I was pastoring a church in Virginia, and it's called By the Way Baptist Church.
Okay.
And it was basically a group of people that had come together in my home for a Bible study, and it grew into a church. And these people were mostly unchurched. They hadn't gone to anybody's church, or they hadn't been in church since they were like 8 or 9 years old. So they weren't really up on church policy and church politics and church etiquette and all of that. All they wanted to do was come together, learn, and worship God. That was simple, very simple formula. That's all they wanted. And I had been ordained in the African American Baptist Church. And so I was a pastor. And when I was with these people and they would talk, you know, once you start going out, you know, first thing, well, who's your pastor and blah, blah, blah. I felt that they were being teased, basically. And, you know, like you have kids and your mama wear raggedy clothes or whatever, and they say, okay, it was like that. And so I felt like my congregation, they were being teased because they were saying, you may never heard this expression, but we used to have things called jackleg preachers. You ever heard that term?
I've never heard that term.
But jackleg preacher was a minister or preacher who was basically self-ordained and had no formal education whatsoever.
Yeah.
And he would go around and he would preach, and they would say, yeah, you got a jackleg preacher. He don't know diddly squat, you know.
Right.
And that pissed me off, okay? And so I made it my business to go to California and go to PSR, Pacific School of Religion, and get certified, because I felt my people, even though they knew nothing about church, they knew nothing about what was going on, they deserved the best educated pastor that they could have, that they would not be ashamed to have me sit in a room with other pastors and not have something to say, well, he spent a day or two in school.
Right.
And it was important for me that I give them the best, because regardless to whether they were poor, they were on drugs, they had mental health issues, they worked the street, I felt these people needed a top-rate pastor.
Right.
And the only way they're going to get it is going to be through me, because going to seminary and watching what happens when you finish, people want their money back. Like, I spent $20,000 on this education, and not that we don't have a lot of churches that can't afford a PhD or a master's degree, or deserve, I should say, but they can't afford one. Because what it takes to take care of your pastor who has that degree is not gonna, they can't afford it, period. Right. And so I felt like I wanted to be with a group of people that deserved a PhD or a master's degree, or someone who was a theologian, to be with them. And so that's why I took that on, because when I see other people that come out of school, they're looking for the biggest church, the one who can promote their career, the one that they can step up the ladder. They'll take a small church for right now, but eventually they want to move on to higher heights. And I wanted to stay there with my people.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's a remarkable story, thinking about just knowing a little bit of your journey around just access, and getting the right kind of access to get the right kind of care that you needed as a young person and as an adult. And then you carried that over into your ministry, that you wanted your parishioners, you wanted your congregation to also have access. And then you have this compassion as your spiritual gift, and this sense of bravery or radical courage. And you've got this story of a human who feels to me like they are modeling the kind of humanity that could save the world.
Yes, I believe that. I believe that the model that I choose, as you started out, is radical, because I believe, and that's because I have worked and lived and studied amongst the James and a nonviolent life.
Right.
And until you are a person that really has this love for all living beings, as long as we continue to eat, destroy, and kill other beings, we will continue to have war and strife. I had a t-shirt made just for me, and it says, "Vegans for peace." The reason I'm a vegan is for peace.
Yeah.
Because I feel that as long as we continue to not pay attention to the animals and all the other beings on the earth, they'll never be at peace. Person once said, you can tell about a country the way they treat its animals and its women.
Right.
And we do a very poor job of taking care of our animals, our women, and our land. And yet we say that we are the lovers of the universe and we encompass, but yet we're not willing to sacrifice. As a vegan for peace is not only for my health, it's for the health and well-being of every being on this planet.
When I left, I was on faculty at PSR for a couple years. And after the 2016 election, I left and moved home to the South, and I chose the regressive politics of Tennessee over the regressive politics of Texas, my native state, which is where you are. And when I moved here, I had a long conversation with myself, which was, how can I justify consuming meat that I buy at the grocery store? How can I justify consuming mass-produced meat with no relationship to the animal or the farm or the farmer? And so I went on a long journey of figuring out how I can have a relationship with my food. And living in Tennessee, there are farms all around Nashville. And I found an organic, women-owned farm. So I buy my vegetables from the farm. And so every week, my partner and I go to the farm to pick up 11 or 12 pieces of vegetables, ranging from potatoes to mushrooms. And so we eat that every week. And it occurred to me, I could do the same with meat if I went to a local butcher shop where they had a relationship with farmers, where it was ethically sourced. And so, though I am not plant-based, I am very conscious about reducing violence and reducing my consumption over mass-produced meat. So I buy locally, I buy small, I only buy enough for the week. If we run out of meat, we run out of meat, and we make do with our vegetables, But you are right that we can judge a lot by society, how we treat the vulnerable, animals, women, children, and the land. And I live on land that was historically stewarded by Shawnee, Yuchi, and Cherokee people, but it was violently taken by settler colonial folks. And there's been no return to tending the land in sustainable or generous ways. And I feel really curious, because you are a vegan and because you are trying to live this anti-violent life, how can we recover some of these compassionate practices for the land? Because as we can see, there are forest fires, there are, all across the land, and a lot of it is accelerated by climate change, our climate crisis. How can we care for the land? How can we always think about anti-violence being, let's reduce violence against Black and brown people, but we do need to talk more about the land. And how do we become friends with trees and plants? So what can we do to reduce the violence in our land?
For me, you have to think that when it comes to the land and the food in which we eat, things have changed over the last 100 years. There used to be farmers, family farmers, who had a certain amount of acres, and they grew a certain amount of potatoes. They grew a certain amount of sheep and cow, and they nurtured and bonded and had a relationship. It wasn't this mass production of thousands and thousands of cows and thousands of chickens crammed in a cage and off to slaughter with no nothing to even say goodbye.
Right.
It's like when practicing Judaism, they have this thing about kosher food and the way you kill it. And the Muslims have the same thing, that you have to bless it and it has to be killed a certain way. It's about paying attention to what you're doing.
Yeah.
If you focus on it, if you put some attention to it and not do it haphazardly, not doing it without even a thought, not even giving a mother cow time to nurse and say goodbye to her young, with so greedy and so selfish, and that you poison the meats. You're feeding pigs dead, rotten fish and dead chickens. This is not healthy for you or the pig,
Right.
So it's a matter of being aware of what's going on and why it's going on, which you see why even in the sea, I used to eat seafood, but it got so tainted with mercury and so much plastic. And we did all this,
right?
There was a time when I was kid, we'd go fishing and catch some nice fish, have a nice meal. But when my dad and I went fishing, we caught enough for our family to eat that day. And any left, we gave the neighbors across the street. They had some fish, but those days are gone. And that's what makes it the economy and the ecosystem so unbalanced, that even in the Jewish tradition now, kosher is no longer enough. They have a thing called ego kosher, which means you just don't think about it as being, you think about how the environment is involved in it, where it comes from. You look at the inclusive and part of being kosher. It has to be environmentally sound and safe in order to be called kosher. And so you have everyone thinking about it, just not being kosher is not enough. You got to be ego kosher,
right,
in order for it to really be effective. And I think that's one of the ways we get started with it, is that little by little we look at, as they say, do as least harm as possible.
Right.
So you figure out, and anyone, how I can do this without causing the least harm to the earth, the environment, myself, the animals, etc. And so you do the least harm as possible, because we have gotten ourselves in such a situation now. When people talk about vegan with me, I say, look, take the 1 day challenge. Make Monday your vegan day. I mean, what the life and the water and the atmosphere that you save that one day makes a difference. You know, I'm a one-on-one person.
Right.
So I'm down on that 1 day vegan. So if everyone could sacrifice 1 day, and be a total plant-based day, that would make a tremendous help in the unit. If everybody planted 1 tree, see, we can do things one by one.
Right.
See, I told you, I'm used to doing things in small amounts, you know, 1 tree, 1 day vegan, you know, 1 day working with different groups of people, but just 1 day with one person, educate, as they say, teach one, each one teach one.
Yeah.
So if you teach that one person and they go on, and eventually everybody can get on that same page. So you start at 1 day and be so excited, where you find that friction that those diehard vegans want to kill everybody that's not vegan instead of celebrating.
Right.
That you didn't eat meat today. I am so happy. I'm not worried about what you do next week or next month. But just for the day, you did it. And I think that's a way of bringing peace. And the more you do something, you see it's easier and you'll begin to feel better. And you might take it on for 3 days.
Right.
Because I didn't become vegan overnight.
Right.
No, I didn't. It was a long process. You know, you kind of give up one thing at a time. You give up the pork and you give up the beef and then you give up the chicken. It's a gradual process.
Right.
And as long as someone is headed in that direction, I feel that they are on the right track.
When I hear this story, Jonathan, the word that bubbles up for me is you have an ethic of love. You know, your orientation to nonviolence, your orientation to the one-on-one, your orientation to small is all. It communicates an ethic of love. And I'm wondering if you've ever thought about what your personal ethic is and if an ethic of love resonates with you.
I still stick to the ethics of nonviolence, because in the nonviolent movement, it takes care of all love. You know, you were asking earlier, how does one go about communicating and getting back in touch with Earth? You know, for me, it's been having one person who's interested to go on a nature walk, to stop and say, do you know what that plant is? How about talking to that tree right there? Just walk over there. I know you're gonna think you're foolish and all of that, but have a conversation. Because in our study today, and people who are interested, you can go online and see the studies where plants have feelings. If they're in a house of violence and everybody's arguing, the plant just withers up and dies. If we begin to pay attention, is what I'm basically saying, to our plants, and we begin to talk to them and cheer them on, and give them hope and energy. I'm gonna tell a short story. Once I found a plant sitting out in a garbage can, and I almost heard this plant say, help, help, you know, and I picked the plant up and I carried him home. And I named him Timothy. And I would talk to Timothy and water Timothy, and nothing. This plant was dead. And I kept the plant about 3 months, and I mean, not a buzz out of Timothy. I was just talking and singing and working with Timothy with all my heart. But I wouldn't give up. That's one of my great qualities. I don't give up on anything. I took Timothy to a plant doctor. And I told the doctor, here he is, give me some medicine for Timothy. And the plant doctor looked at me and said, excuse me, this plant is dead. Do you know what dead is? This plant is dead. I said, look, just give me some medicine for my plant, and I'll take him home and I'll talk to him and I'll work with him. He just needs medicine, like an infusion. He just needs a little help.
Right.
And this is how the story went. The doctor said, okay, he took 1 drop of some sort of plant food and he put it into Timothy. And right there in that doctor's office, the first little green leaf popped out. Wow. I took Timothy home and I had that medicine and I worked with Timothy and he grew, and believe it or not, Timothy was a green pepper plant.
Oh, wow.
After a while, he grew green peppers. I ate green peppers. Timothy lived. And that's to show you that if you really care, you really say, I will not give up. And I never give up. When I couldn't get my GED, it took 27 tries, I didn't give up. When I couldn't get something, I never give up. I don't care how many times it takes me, I won't give up, and I wouldn't give up on Timothy. And Timothy lived another 3 years, died at old age, had a nice burial, and he'll return somewhere again. But I wouldn't have been, I refuse to believe that Timothy was dead.
Yeah.
And that's the thing of making total commitments with plants and other inanimate objects that live. Taking an old desk and putting a coat of varnish on it and bringing it back to life. I can imagine rubbing the oil and watching the life soak back into it. So I believe that all things have a life and a spirit, and we're not in touch with it at all. And I think a part of being compassionate to all includes the way we even treat our furniture.
Yeah, I agree. This has a name. When all things are endowed with life, it's called animism. And this was part of the Christian tradition. But then when the powers to be began creating doctrine and dogma and who's in and who's out, these things get written out. And so we get in at least in the Christian tradition, we get a very anemic spirituality. And so this animism, where all things have spirit or are endowed with life, the trees, the table, the furniture, you know, I mean, I used to read an author, I still read her. She would bump into a chair and say, excuse me, because the chair has feelings. And so when I listen to your story, Jonathon, I'm amazed that there's someone out there who embodies this work. And I guess that I have some sadness that people are so consumed with the all-American dollar, having the big church, having the mass following, when if we just believe that small is all and work one-on-one, we could really change the world. And I think that's what I find myself drawn to, because I'm an intense introvert and I don't like to be in crowds, and I much prefer to be one-on-one with people. And I do believe that's where the real work begins, when we are one-on-one. And we've lost our way in many respects.
Yes. And I'm going to have to borrow that the rest of my life from you. All is all, one is all. I love that statement you made. I might have tattooed somewhere on my wall. One is all.
Do it. Really, you can have it.
Very powerful, very powerful. And that's what I'm talking about in conversations. You teach me, I teach you. Yeah. You know, you bought me something, I give you something. It's always an exchange of information. And that's what the things have to be, that we can exchange and not overlook one part of a person or a group and say, well, we have it all. You can't tell me nothing, you too old. You can't tell me nothing, you too young. You can't tell me nothing, you don't have a degree. You can't tell me nothing, I have a degree.
Right.
But when you get that oneness, that we're just, nothing else exists but the Spirit of God.
Right.
And everything is one. And I guess that's why I really love that one is all, because there's only one. And when we begin to see that in each other and don't see the differences that separate us, but that we are a one, I'm one with the tree. And so I can have a conversation. I can sit and listen. The native people from Africa and South America always listen quietly to see what the wind had to say.
Right.
But we don't sit still long enough. We get irritated if the wind blows,
Right.
making all that noise out there instead of listening to what the wind is saying, what the trees are saying.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, Jonathan, I'm left with this image of a horizon. What you offer me is life before sunrise.
Mm.
And that those liminal moments where it's the in between. I mean, we talked about this earlier, that we are two people who defy categories. We don't like to be boxed in. And I find that if we can invest in these in between moments, we can find the right kind of oneness that could save us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I believe that every pastor who has a church or a congregation should have a time that they willing to take one person in the congregation out on a nature walk.
Mm.
See, the great thing about, by the way, it was only 15 members. It was 15 of us dedicated to what we did. And with 15, it's easier to put all your strength and all your energy into 15 than having a digging board with just 50 people. That don't even take care of your church. You have so many people. So I always liked wherein I could spend an individual day with each individual. We could meet as a group. But when I met with you one-on-one, it was all about just you and me. And it was no rush. If it took you 4 hours to get out what you had to say between your tears and your gripes and your groans, hey, you got me for the whole 4 hours.
Right.
And unlike when you have ministers, when you look at their appointment book, they book, I got marital counseling with this person, and I got divorce counseling with this person,
right,
and initiation service with, and so you go through your whole day on this 45-minute slot.
Right.
When the people I dealt with, it took them 45 minutes to get their head on. And
right,
if they had attention disorder, I had to wait for them to get back on the train every now and then.
right.
If they were going through some issues, I had to sit there and wait patiently till they could get themselves together. And that's my whole life, is to spend that much time with one person, you know, and not having to rush. In fact, if I made an appointment, it was only one person that day because it was for that day.
Right.
You know, you had me all day as long as you needed me. And that's an unusual type ministry when everybody is so rushing. And when it came to teaching, you could have a class or a Bible study together, but there's always that one who say, I didn't get nothing you said. I don't understand that. I don't even believe that. Sit down and walk me through this. And that's where I got my greatest satisfaction, on that one-on-one and watching people grow. And I am proud to say this, that church was in 1994. I didn't leave there until 1996 and come out to PSR to get my degree and go back. And here it is now, 2000 and whatever, 1. Those 15 people are all still together as a family group. They still are ministering to each other. They're still loving each other. They're still living on the principles that was taught, and they still consider me their pastor. In fact, I had a call last night. One of my members has decided, I'm going to get married and you have to marry me. I wouldn't go anywhere else because you're still my pastor, even though
Right.
I am 2,000 miles away. I'm still marrying them, still burying them. I'm still their pastor because the commitment I made was a lifetime commitment.
Right. Well, thank you, Jonathan. You are an inspiration to me and so many others. And I'm so grateful that we had to got a chance to have this conversation. I hope that I get to have a beard like yours at some point.
It takes time. Rome won't build in a day.
Yeah.
As folks say, one hand at a time. It
Right.
comes with wisdom. Get that one hand, tell me about it. Email me and say, I got it. It's
Right.
right there on my chin, and I will celebrate with you. You're
Thank you.
one, okay?
Thank you.
You're welcome. It's great being with you too. I've learned so much from you. I appreciate you.
Thank you.
We have a question. Someone is wondering, they said, great talk. They're wondering what's next for Jonathon, and also what's next for Robyn. And I think, I'm not sure, Jonathon, if you're answering, make sure that you are unmuting yourself.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah. What's next? Well, I'm one of these people who believe that if it's working, don't try to fix it. And what I've been doing the past 30 years is working. I'll continue with my one-on-one. I'll continue with my research that I'm doing because the next one-on-one project is about taking an individual, especially in the fire mode, finding another right road authentically and holistically, to sit down with one-on-one and help them figure out the right road, regardless of what religious tradition they're coming from. And if they're coming from a background of hurt, to help heal that through educating them about what the scriptures really say and learning to read it in Hebrew and understand what it really is, so you won't be misled. So that's my what's next.
And for me, my next book is dropping around Trans Day of Awareness, March 2022. So I'm preparing for that, and I'm teaching 2 classes this fall and teaching 2 classes in the spring. And so staying busy in academic life and in the public scholar life, and just really thrilled to have had this conversation and to really exchange ideas cross-generationally to imagine another possible world.
Thank you so much. Let me see if we have anything else. Q&A box or in the chat. Okay, so this is a compliment and maybe a question somewhere in here. What a gift to hear these 2 humans hum together. Thank you. I'm curious about how these 2 got matched for this conversation and the others for the other conversations for that matter. Not sure if you're the one that answers this. Maybe we can see how we can. Let's see. There's another part to that. No, it looks like that's it. How do you guys feel like I'm not sure really how we can answer this question on how folks are getting matched for conversations. Do you guys want to give any feedback or anything to your conversation with each other, being matched with each other or anything? I'm not sure, but this person really enjoyed hearing the conversation between y'all.
I mean, I have no idea how we got paired. I don't know, the pairing gods did that, but it was a bit providential because in our first conversation, Jonathan and I talked about how we opt out of the categories and opt out of labels, and to know that someone older than me was saying fuck the categories is inspirational to me. That there are more people maybe like me than I realize, but I have no idea how we got paired.
Jonathan, were you going to say something?
Yes, I was going to say, I'm with you. I believe that the powers that be, the universe, the stars, however you want to name it, had already preordained it. If we were to meet, because we have always been together. That's one of my things in life. Whether we've ever seen each other before, but somewhere in a spiritual realm we had met and our souls had connected, and it was time to put a soul with the body, because it was so many things that we did have in common. And there's so many things that working together to bring this to fruition, it had to be, because I believe, like you say, we were meant to be the pair together, So yes, that's how I think we came together, because we're both on the spectrum. We're both out there, we both see things in a different way, but yet we're here to show people that no matter where you are, we can still come together and bring forth a great harvest. And that's what this was all about for me.
All right, thank you both so much for that. And I hope that everybody enjoyed the conversation and realized why this was a perfect match for the conversation. We are going to go back to Jonathan, and then we'll go ahead and close the event for today. After, I'm sorry, we're going to go back to Justin, and after Justin, fine, you're off the clock. And then after that, I will be closing the conversation.
Great. Well, once again, I want to invite you to support LGBTQ-RAN at this time as we celebrate 20 years of preserving history and plan for our future. So if you want to continue with great conversations like this, and with continue to come to our Queering Our Roots series. And again, to make a donation, it's giveq.org on your phone or on your computer. And your gift will be matched by a donor up to $20,000. If you are a first-time donor, your gift will be tripled, because a donor will not only match your gift, but then another donor will match that gift at the beginning. So again, we are driven by the mantra that history is told by the perspective of those who preserve their records, and we're committed to ensuring that legacy will be passed on to future generations. So we invite you to give, and thank you so much for all of your support.
Okay, thank you so much, Jonathan and Robyn, for sharing so much of who you are with us today. Don't forget to block the next 3 Wednesdays to join us for the remaining 3 intergenerational conversations. On October 20th, we will have preeminent Jewish lesbian feminist thinker and writer Evelyn Evie Torton Beck, Ph.D., and assistant professor and author Zora Wayman-Kelman. On October 27th, we will have administrator and senior bishop of the Unity Fellowship Church Movement, Bishop Zachary Jones, along with third-year PhD student, the Reverend Paul Anthony Daniels, and we will be posthumously honoring the former prelate of the Unity Fellowship Church Movement, Archbishop Carl Bean. And to complete our series on November 3rd, we will have founder of Metropolitan Community Churches, the Reverend Elder Dr. Troy D. Perry, a psychotherapist and author, author Matthias Roberts. Be here for one or all of our conversations in the series. You won't be disappointed. Lastly, please plan to join us for our closing celebration at LGBTQ-RAN's Gala on November 7th, Sunday, the last event celebrating the 20th anniversary of LGBTQ-RAN and acknowledging 20 years of queering our roots. Remember, you're invited to stay around for a couple of seconds since we did go a little bit over time today, but you are invited to stick around for any conversation as we close the event for today. And thank you guys so much for joining us.